In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out into the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. They were young, strong, highly trained. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student. Weeks later, their tent was found cut open from the inside. Their bodies were discovered, scattered across the snow. Some were barefoot. Some had severe internal injuries. One was missing her tongue. The official explanation blamed a natural force. But what happened that night on that mountain still disturbs investigators to this day. The group consisted of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Igor Dyatlov led the expedition. With him were Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonishenko, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. They were attempting a Grade 3 hiking expedition, the highest level of difficulty at the time. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, deep within the northern Urals. They documented their journey with photographs and diaries. They laughed, they skied, they posed for playful images in the snow. Nothing in those early photographs suggested fear. On February 1st, 1959, the group reached the eastern slope of Kolatsiakol. In the local Mansi language, the name roughly translates to Dead Mountain. Weather conditions were deteriorating. Strong winds, low visibility, freezing temperatures. Instead of descending into the forest for shelter, the group pitched their tent on an exposed slope. It was a decision that would later be questioned. That night, something happened. When rescuers finally located the campsite, weeks later, the tent was partially buried in snow. But what shocked investigators most was the fabric. It had been cut open from the inside. Personal belongings were still inside. Boots, coats, supplies. It appeared that the group had fled in extreme haste. Why would experienced hikers leave the safety of their tent in sub-zero temperatures, many of them barefoot? The first 2 bodies were found beneath a cedar tree, about 1 kilometer from the tent. They were Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. Both were barefoot. Both wore only minimal clothing. Between them lay the remains of a small fire. Branches above showed signs that someone had climbed the tree, possibly to look back toward the tent. Over the next weeks, the bodies of Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin were discovered between the tree and the tent. It appeared they had tried to make their way back. They never reached it. Two months later, the remaining 4 hikers were found in a ravine covered by deep snow. Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. Their injuries were far more severe. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had massive chest trauma. Thibault-Brignol suffered a fatal skull fracture. Dubinina was missing her tongue and parts of her lips. Yet there were no external wounds, consistent with a violent attack. Investigators compared the injuries to those seen in high-impact car accidents, but there were no signs of a fighting, no witnesses, no signs of a struggle. The Soviet investigation concluded that the hikers died due to a compelling natural force. The case was closed. Decades later, the official explanation shifted toward an avalanche. The theory suggests a slab of snow may have collapsed onto the tent, forcing the group to cut their way out and flee into the night. Disoriented and injured, they succumbed to hypothermia. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case. In 2020, they reaffirmed their avalanche theory. But critics argue that the slope angle was too shallow and the tent remained partially intact. If it was an avalanche, why were footprints visible for hundreds of meters? Why did some hikers suffer extreme internal injuries while others did not? Over the decades, the Dyatlov Pass Incident has given rise to numerous alternative theories. Each attempts to explain the strange injuries, the sudden flight from the tent, and the silence that followed. One of the most discussed theories involves a secret Soviet military test. At the time, the region was known for weapons development and missile experiments. Some witnesses reported seeing bright orange spheres in the sky during the nights surrounding the incident. If the hikers had unknowingly entered a restricted testing zone, they may have been exposed to shockwaves, explosive pressure, or even classified weapons. Supporters of this theory point to the severe internal injuries suffered by Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov. Their fractured ribs resembled trauma caused by a powerful blast. Additionally, traces of radiation were reportedly found on some clothing. However, official records have never confirmed a military operation in that exact location. Another theory focuses on infrasound. Certain wind patterns flowing over mountain slopes can create a phenomenon known as the Karman vortex street. This can generate low-frequency sound waves, inaudible to the human ear, but capable of inducing panic, anxiety, and intense psychological distress. If such conditions occurred that night, the group may have experienced a sudden wave of irrational fear. In a state of panic, they could have cut open the tent and fled into the freezing darkness. Once outside, clarity may have returned, but by then, it was too late. There is also the possibility of an encounter with the local Mansi people. The Mansi are indigenous to the region, and initially, suspicion briefly fell on them. But investigators found no evidence of struggle, no defensive wounds, and no signs of outside footprints. The Mansi were later cleared completely. More speculative theories suggest that the hikers witnessed something they were not meant to see. Secret operations, experimental parachute mines, even unknown aerial phenomena. The missing tongue of Lyudmila Dubinina has fueled particularly dark speculation. But forensic experts have argued that natural decomposition and scavenging animals could explain the soft tissue loss. In truth, each alternative theory attempts to fill the gaps left by uncertainty, yet none fully account for every detail of that night. The injuries, the orderly footprints, the decision to leave the tent. Some mysteries persist, not because there are no answers, but because no single answer explains everything. Igor Dyatlov was only 23 years old. Zinaida Kolmogorova was 22. They were students, friends, explorers. More than 60 years later, their final moments remain unknown. Perhaps a natural force truly drove them from their tent, or perhaps something occurred that was never fully disclosed. On a frozen slope in the Ural Mountains, 9 young hikers made a decision that would become one of history's most haunting mysteries. The snow eventually melted, but the questions never did.